So we'll start the meeting with a karakia from Councillor Templeton.
Kia ora koutou, tukuna te karakia. Tu tawa mai I runga, tu tawa mai I raro, tu tawa mai I roto, tu tawa mai I waho. Kia tau ai, te mauri tū, te mauri ora ki te katoa. Haumi e, hui e, tai ki e.
We have apologies from Councillor Goff for absence, Councillor MacDonald for lateness, and from the Mayor, Councillors Galloway, McClellan, for early departure or partial absence. Pauline's moved it. Do I have a seconder? Tim, all those in favour?
Aye.
There are no declarations of interest that have been made aware of. Confirmation of previous minutes from the 1st of April. Do I have someone to move them? Jimmy, seconded by Andrew. All those in favour?
Aye.
Any against? Carried. There's no public forum. We'll move through to the deputations by appointment. We have 2 today. There were going to be 3, but one person can't make it. So the first deputation is from the Rickard and Bush Kilmarnock Residents Association. Tony and Tony, welcome. You have 10 minutes, which includes questions and answers as well.
Kia ora koutou, ko Tony Simons aho. I'm chair of the Rickard and Bush Kilmarnock Residents Association. We cover a small but important area in Lower Riccarton. Our members live north of Riccarton Road, between the railway line near Mona Vale and out to Riccarton Bush. And we are directly in the firing line when it comes to this new National Policy Statement on Urban Development. We understand Council has already submitted on the impacts of this policy, and I believe to a large extent Council's concerns were ignored. But we're here today to invite you to do whatever you can within the terms of the statement to make sure that our area is protected from more intensification. My colleague here, Tony Dale, will start the presentation and talk about the bigger picture, and he probably will be telling you things you already know, but we'd like to reinforce them, and then I'll talk specifically about the area that we represent. Thank you again for giving us this opportunity.
Thank you, Tony. Now, yes, at the risk of reminding the committee of what they have said previously, the NPS seems to be a terrible mistake as it is being applied to Christchurch, and the bad effects of this new policy can be predicted. For example, further decay of the city centre, which I think you have talked about yourselves. So this approach has failed before of using key activity centres, and it's beginning to fail again now. Already the implementation of NPSUD has committed one of the cardinal errors of the failed Melbourne 2030 planning policy. This was when people looked at why it failed. So they've ignored, the New Zealand implementation has ignored community input during the so-called consultation phase. This policy seems to have been just pushed through, irrespective of what local communities say. And in the case of Christchurch, the implementation will be toxic, in fact, to desperately needed development of the city centre. And we view this with great concern because not only will the city centre continue to stagnate, but the suburbs, which don't need the kind of huge intensification mooted in the NPS, will be filled up with high-rise buildings and so on. And we'll talk about that more later. And we know that this can happen because after the 2011 earthquakes, we found that Christchurch didn't really need a city centre to keep on functioning, at least not in some sense, but to function as a real city and larger community, we need a city centre and we need incentives to develop it. So when we look at the simple-minded way, and I've lifted this picture from your own submission, we see that half of Greater Christchurch is due to be rezoned high density with mandated minimum densities and high rises and all sorts of things. This just seems crazy when the city centre needs that high density pushed in, not pulled out. So our view is that the qualifying matter clause of NPS is there to be used, and we hope that the council will use it extensively to protect amenities, because that's the only mechanism that seems to be available. Otherwise, the large area that you can see will be intensified almost at random, and you can just imagine a nice ring of high-rise apartments around Rickarton Bush, for example. So we ask you, please don't use the Melbourne 2030 approach of don't think, just do. Please apply common sense. Because we're coming up to the sharp end of NPS. It's already starting to bite. We notice developments in Jane Dean's Close that are simply flouting the current planning regulations. And we view that with great concern because it makes it look as though the council has simply rolled over and given up. And furthermore, the RMA is being repealed, and part of that repealing process seems to be a further erosion of any mention of amenity values, so the kind of values that make a community worth living in. Amenity values were only mentioned a few times in the RMA, in fact, but used extensively, and obviously the government committee has said, well, we'll put a stop to that. NPSUD only mentions amenities 3 times, and that only to say that amenity values must change. So the protection of the amenity values of our city will be very much left in your lap and the lap of your colleagues, because it's essential to protect amenities if you want a city people actually like to live in. I mean, you can look all around the world for disasters, you know, going right back to English tower block developments and what happened there, and Melbourne 2030, which was a fiasco from the very beginning. So we ask that the council represents the citizens that elected them to the central government. Thank you very much.
Okay, so I'd just like to talk a little bit about the specific matters around Rickarton and a particular area. And as Tony has said, qualifying matters are allowed under the NPSUD, and you as a council have the right to determine what they should be. Everyone has a right to a decent home in Aotearoa. However, rezoning does not build homes. People do. And it certainly doesn't build affordable homes. What it might do, however, is very effectively destroy neighbourhoods and communities. Our focus is on Lower Rickarton, but we have no doubt other areas of Christchurch also deserve your protection. Others, we have no doubt, will welcome high density, and that's fine. But as Tony again has said, we should be consulting around that. We're not against development, but we are against any policy that suggests that there's one national solution for the entire country. Our area, as I say, is Lower Rickarton, north of Rickarton Road. It is the site of the earliest European settlement in Christchurch. We consider it a treasure. It tells the story of that settlement, including that initial collaboration with Ngāi Aruhiri and a community which has been built over 180 years. There are important buildings and notable trees scattered throughout the area, and I suppose I just invite you to imagine what multi-storey buildings might look like overlooking some of these landmarks. And then we have Pū Taringa Motu. This Ngāhere forest is commonly called Dean's Bush or Riccarton Bush. The area is Putaringa Motu, or the place that echoes, perhaps because it's all that was left after the Great Fires swept across the plains in the 14th century. Ngāi Tū Ahuriri had established a pa in this area in 1846 when the Deans brothers leased the land in the area, and that was just 6 years after the treaty was signed. It is a kahikatea forest, and they are swamp-dwelling trees. They are already under pressure from existing intensification that's resulted in even more water being drained away from the area into the city's stormwater system. I don't know if you know this, but irrigation has been installed in the bush, so one gets the feeling that this taonga is already in some trouble. The Riccarton Bush Trust is responsible for its care and its maintenance, and it also has serious concerns and supports us here today. It intends to make a submission to Council and is seeking legal advice regarding Council obligations under the 1914 Riccarton Bush Act. There are just two more points I'd like to make before winding this up, and they're quite important. We've been through this all before. Firstly, the residents we represent, and you represent as well, went through lengthy proceedings in 2015 before an independent hearings panel which was set up specifically to promote development in Christchurch. So this work has already been done. That panel, chaired by Sir John Hanson, considered more than 4,800 submissions, and it heard all the evidence. That process took 2 years. From the decision on the 10th of December 2015, on the slide, just like to remind you that residents from our area came out in force during this process. The panel listened, and when it was all over, ruled higher density is not appropriate in our area. Today, 6 years later, nothing has changed. In fact, the case today against density is stronger, because the final point I'd make was in 2015, soon after the earthquakes, with the eastern suburbs devastated, many were worried there'd be a housing supply crisis. Very simply, more houses were built, and today there is no crisis. In fact, I think you possibly would agree there's a housing boom in Christchurch. More than $1 billion worth of new housing has been approved this year. That's 2,800 extra houses in 12 months, the most ever on record, and any argument suggesting more density is needed across the city is weak. The Greater Christchurch Partnership, and a number of you are on that committee, has already determined there is more than enough housing development capacity in Christchurch to meet demand for the next 30 years. So Riccarton residents should not have to go through all of this again. We simply ask, when it comes to our area, Putaringa Motu, Lower Riccarton, the decision by Sir John Hanson and his panel in 2015 needs to be respected and upheld. Thank you very much for listening to us.
Thank you very much. Obviously it's gone over the 10 minutes, but it was good to get your deputation finished, so thank you for coming in today. I'd also just like to note, obviously following the two deputations, we will have the presentation, so council officers are in the room listening to these two deputations and maybe have to respond to some of the points raised, and obviously there'll be questions from councillors as well.
Thank you very much.
The next deputation is from Helen Broughton, speaking to the same item. Kia ora, Helen.
Kia ora. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. For those who are newer to council, the only ones who were there when I was there was Yanni, Jimmy and Aaron. I've had a strong interest and background in planning. When I was on council for 13 years, I was on all the council planning committees, and I'm accredited as a resource consent commissioner, and so I'm on a number of panels, and I see the implications of the plan once it gets to a resource consent hearing. I'm concerned that the passage of the National Policy Statement on Urban Development, National Policy Standards, went through Parliament in August 2020 and passed through without great comment. It went through with a lot of legislation. So I believe the public are not fully aware of what's happening. Some are, and there's huge concern. The National Policy Standards needs to inform our regional plan and our district plan. And I want to acknowledge Council's efforts in trying to separate Christchurch out from this statement. You made a lengthy submission, but it really wasn't listened to. I also made one, as did the local association. This will cause concern across Christchurch, and it's at particular risks are the suburbs around a large shopping centre. I've been at 2 meetings where there's been a range of residents. Today I want to focus on the area outlined by the Rickard Kilmarnock Residents Association. It is the area in which I live, but I'm not a member of the association. I think for us there's a special case. As Tony Simmons said, we went before the independent hearings panel chaired by Sir John Hanson, I should say, in 2015, and in 2016 he actually granted our view that we should stay at suburban density. The other area that also did this was the Condell Avenue area, and your chair, Mike Davidson, made a submission, as did Minister Brownlee. So I think there's 2 areas which can be called a special case because they've been before the hearings panel. Council can act on this. You can provide an exemption for these 2 areas as a qualifying matter. You could also look at other areas too and see if they are a qualifying matter. To do this as a council, you need to go through a formal process. I've spoken to the Wellington officer who designed these urban standards, and he has informed me too that this is quite proper and normal. It's just the evaluation process has to be stringent. People, just talking emotionally, people of our area have been through a huge amount of stress in 2015. They felt the area was going to be decimated. They made submissions. There were both people making small submissions and people making lengthy submissions. And to have to go through this again, because Wellington has decided that this is going to happen, just seems impossible. So I'm asking you as a council to be bold, to look carefully at this area and Condell Avenue area and make it a qualifying matter. Apparently, if you make it a qualifying matter and argue it, then that is the end of that. I don't think it has to go to, in fact, Wellington. I'm not totally sure on that, but I don't think it has to pass through Wellington. These national standards are far worse than medium density. This is high density, 6 stories, and if I can give you some numbers from what's currently happening. In medium density, we have an intensification beyond expectations. When the plan came out, it was 30 households per hectare. We're now at 75 households per hectare. So even in our own plan, it's gone beyond what was expected. I know that you've got a challenge ahead. This is not going to be easy, but I'm making a plea, I should say, because I'm speaking here on myself, to please protect this area which we've outlined as a qualifying matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. There's some time questions. Yanni?
Thank you. I guess, have you thought what would happen if all the other groups, residents groups in the city came and said we want our areas to be qualifying as
No,
well?
I
And what
haven't, but they could, I guess, yes. There's people are finding out incidentally, actually, and they're getting quite angry. But it's, and I know the other groups are trying to form a group. So there will be a group of residents at some stage coming to speak to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I know there's a problem if every area asks the same. But I just wanted to make a special case on the grounds we've been through the independent hearings panel.
Right.
Yeah.
And although your deputation's focused on the prevention of intensification, do you think, have you got any thoughts on what council could do in regards to getting improved urban design?
No, because actually on hearings panels, it's meant to go through an urban design assessment, which it does, but it never holds anything. It's never strong enough, basically. I don't know how one does that. Yeah, but just to be aware that it doesn't make things a lot better.
Thank you. Sarah, then Tim.
Kia ora, thanks, Helen.
Thank you.
I'm just wondering, given that Christchurch is pretty well surrounded by versatile soils,
Yes.
and we don't have an MPS on that yet, and we will continue to have a growing population
Yes.
over time, how do you propose that we cater for those future generations of Christchurch residents
Yeah.
who will need somewhere to live
Yes.
that is, relatively central with good public transport and is affordable?
Yeah. Well, there's two answers probably. If you're looking at us in Riccarton, where the area we're talking about, it's quite cohesive with two heritage buildings, a cohesive community. Areas of Riccarton Road, some people would probably love to have high rise, probably not 6 stories, but they're quite run down old houses, probably rented. And I just think we should have council should have the flexibility, if you're going to do this, to choose which area. And I'm not sure you have a lot of choice, actually.
So you think we should be...
So I just think there's areas that would want to be intensified.
Yeah. So you think we should make a political choice over protecting some leafier suburbs over other suburbs that may be already run down and have social
Well,
issues?
it depends if they want. Yeah, it depends what those residents or landlords want, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. On your now, we zoned a lot of land post earthquake because I was on that earthquake council, and I understand there's sufficient land going forward. But I would protect, if you can, versatile soils. So anything that's left of versatile soils, please protect.
Well, there are some of those within the current infrastructure boundaries, even within those.
Which has been rezoned, has it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So-
We were under pressure to actually rezone.
Can we, well, I want to
at the
move to
time.
Tim so he has time
Yeah.
to answer his question.
Is that enough, Sarah?
Yeah, thank you, Mike. Just let's be clear, the Independence Hearing Panel was pretty brutal with some suburbs. Your suburb did, pretty well,
Yes.
but others didn't. So,
Yes.
and they're still upset with regards to intensification. But with regards to coming to the council, which I applaud you for, and the others, and I can see Julie in the back there, who I've been working with, and our community board's been working with. But the national policy statement is a directive from central government, and you'll see some of the wording, and it's actually Auckland and Wellington centric rather than Christchurch.
Yes,
That's fairly obvious. But have you encouraged others with your long knowledge and long standing with regards to these areas, lobbied your MPs, both irrelevant of party, because you've got one MP in, you've got others that want to be in, and etc. Have you been lobbying, and have you been made that public?
We're just starting. we've certainly encouraging people to lobby. We'll probably have to have a meeting and encourage them more.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about the Condell Avenue area, which we didn't do, we were quite polite, and one of our members was going to go and speak to Jerry Brownlee at the time, and it didn't happen. But the Condell Avenue area, from what I understand, they sent emails and phone calls, and a huge amount of pressure went on.
And I can assure you
yes.
that others have done that too and
Yes.
have had no luck whatsoever.
And no
so,
luck.
yeah. So, but I do think, to be very clear, that council can only do so much because it is it's a national policy statement from central government.
Yes, and I suppose
And be honest with that with regards to everybody.
I'm
and
going
trying
to
to
jump
you.
in because that was more of a statement than a question.
And so I'm just asking.
Thanks,
I'm asking
Helen.
that too. Sorry.
Thank you very much.
Good,
You've
thank
been
you.
very clear. So thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you for your time. Okay. There are no petitions, so we'll move to item 7, the overview of the rules regarding intensification. Thank you, John and David. So I understand you have a presentation. You'll be able to respond to some of the points raised from the deputations as well. Sure.
Yep.
Great, thank you.
That's fine. Right. So my name's David Faulkner. I'm one of the team leaders of the city planning area. And
Yeah, John Higgins, the Head of Resource Consensus.
so we're here today to give a presentation that we're giving to community boards at the moment. And also part of that is we'll respond to some of the points that have been made in the deputations. This is obviously quite a hot topic at the moment, and so we're here to try and explain what the situation is. And as I said, we're already rolling this out with the community boards. We went to Sprayton Cashmere on Monday. We've got Papua New Guinea tomorrow, and the other city community boards later this month. I just want to start by saying, so John and I are council staff. We are, in most cases, not the decision makers in this, and as has been pointed out already, a lot of this is coming from direction from central government, which we are legally required to give effect to. So we'll try and explain the situation and where the ability is for us to influence that, but in a lot of cases it is more about passing on the message in terms of what the direction is and what's happening at the moment. So just first of all, I just wanted to explain what intensification is. Really, intensification is about having more houses within the same footprint of the city. And as been pointed out, so we have somewhere for our growing population to live without losing our productive land. So the two main ways for the cities to grow is generally up and out. So out is more of the urban expansion, urban sprawl, greenfield development, that kind of thing. And up is sort of intensification. It doesn't need to necessarily be up, doesn't need to necessarily be higher. It could be houses in backyards, sort of infilling development. It could be sort of brownfield development, which is converting places like industrial land to residential. So there is a whole range of means that intensification can be used. And I just wanted to sort of paint a bit of a picture of some of the challenges and opportunities and the reason why this is an issue at the moment. So our city is growing quite a lot at the moment, has been over the last few years. And as was pointed out by the deputation, there is a lot of building happening at the moment. The city is changing and will continue to do so over the number of coming decades. We're residents of the city and we see the change and we understand the concerns that are going on at the moment. Whilst growth is inevitable, it needs to be well planned. That's what we're trying to do. And it will require us to do it differently, especially with this direction from central government, which is quite directive. We're used to change in the city post-earthquake, so we can learn from our experience of how we can adapt to these changes. And we are largely, as has been pointed out in the deputation, we are largely already ahead of the game. We are seeing a lot of building. We've had a lot of building happening. We are comparatively affordable compared to other cities. That's largely because we have been ahead we've been building, and that is a real asset for the city. But there is a lot of work to be done in the future. And yeah, as I say, we're citizens of the city. We're in this together. We need to make this work best for our future and for our children and grandchildren. So what's happening at the moment? So this is just a map of the city showing where intensification can happen as of right. So the more darker areas, especially in the central city, and then the sort of dark orange areas around the central city where there's medium density, the medium density zoning. And then the lighter orange areas is our transition zone where we have some density, and then the lighter areas is our residential suburban zone. So the closer you get to the city, the more density is allowed, and around some of our key activity centres, some of our shopping centres as well. And largely that is where we're getting intensification. So most of it is happening in the central city or in the inner suburbs. So this is showing the red areas is where the most intensification is happening over the last few years. We do manage intensification at the moment through a number of rules in our district plan. These are just some of the key things we control through the district plan in terms of height, tree planting, the maximum density in some areas, the maximum coverage, so we allow that there's still space for green space on a site and vegetation, the amount of outdoor living space that every unit should have, setbacks, urban design assessments, that kind of thing. So, and I've got a diagram there of the recession planes just to show that we also control shading onto neighbouring properties as well. But so these rules, as been alluded to, did come from our district plan review, which did go through full public consultation in between 2013 and sort of 2015, and then hearings. But decisions were made by independent hearings panel, as was alluded to before, chaired by Sir John Hanson. Appeals were only on points of law, so it wasn't a decision that council made. It was a decision that an independent hearings panel made. And the panel was also given a statement of expectations. This was directed by central government through an order in council, that the district plan review must do these things, which is significantly reduce the reliance on resource consents, reduce the number of controls and standards to encourage innovation and choice, and reduce the number of the requirements for notification, and also facilitate an increase of housing supply. So that gives you a bit of a background of how the rules ended up the way they were. It was very much trying to enable development, and there was obviously not put too many hurdles in the way in terms of notification. So I just wanted to sort of clarify why we needed intensification. Some of that was some questions were asked that this morning. So yeah, as I mentioned before, Christchurch has got comparatively affordable housing. There is obviously housing need for some members of our community, so it's not affordable for all by any means. But compared to other cities, we have got generally lower house prices, and there's a correlation that we have built far more houses per person than the other major cities in the country. As has been mentioned before, more intensification provides for more housing supply. It helps us. We've still got a housing issue in terms of there's almost 2,000 people on our housing waiting list for social housing at the moment. It helps with less sprawl, less emissions from people having to drive further to get to employment in the more central areas, protection of productive land, and helps with regeneration of our city. There was also a question about the impact on the central city, and that is a very live concern. I absolutely agree. But this is a graph showing the amount of houses that we need over the next 30 years to provide for just for the needs of the growing population according to projections. You'll see down the bottom is the light green is the 20,000 houses on top of the houses that we need to get 20,000 people in the central city, which is just a small amount of the total number of houses we need. So whilst yes, we definitely need housing in the central city, and we're looking to do that, we will still need housing in suburban areas and housing in greenfield areas to meet our population needs. So, and it's really the suburban areas where the majority of that growth will come. Even when the central city is fully built, we need a lot more housing in the suburban areas. And we are getting a lot more intensification at the moment. It is growing, but so that graph shows over the last few years the amount of houses for intensification that we've seen. But our target in order to meet population growth is even higher, and that's just to keep up with the needs of a growing population. And so we still will need more growth just to meet the needs. I'll now pass over to John to talk about the consenting process.
Okay, so most multi-unit developments need a resource consent. There's a trigger when they're, depending on the zoning, when there's 3 or 4 units, but everything over that needs a resource consent. When it comes in, they make an application. Council staff are required to do 2 assessments. One, whether it should be notified, and that's whether it should consult with neighbours or the general public at large, and whether or not the consent should be granted. There's been a big push over about a decade or even longer to streamline and simplify the Resource Management Act, and that's resulted in less applications being notified. I recall when I first started in this sort of business, there was a lot more applications that were notified. Now it's very few, less than 1% of overall applications. As David's already noted, the district plan even reinforced that too, and there was objectives in the district plan review that to reduce reliance on resource consents and notification. So the result of all that is there's not many applications that are notified now. I'm just a bit more of an explanation about what triggers notification. It's where there are minor effects, we look at neighbours, and where there's more than minor effects, we're looking at public notification. It's really important to note, because obviously neighbours see this monstrosity sort of happening next door. We have to take into account when we're doing our assessments what is permitted by the district plan, what's anticipated by the district plan. It's not a sort of clean slate. It is, we have to acknowledge that bulk, that scale that is anticipated by the zoning. Most of the time what we see are small breaches. We don't often see significant breaches. So I'm talking about, say a recession plan intrusion. It might only be 50 mils, it might be 100 mils. It triggers the provision, but it's a very small breach that possibly no one would really even know existed if they didn't see it on a plan. The other thing with the district plan is we have a lot of rules that say we cannot notify to neighbours. So it's got a specific clause there that says you cannot notify this particular rule breach to neighbours. So that's pretty common throughout our plan. And then when it comes to consider whether to grant or decline an application, we're looking at the objectives and policies of the plan, and we're looking at the level of adverse effects. And similar to the notification decision, it's not a clean slate assessment. We're looking at what's anticipated, what's permitted by the plan, in terms of we're looking at over and above that. And this was mentioned earlier in the deputations. It was discussed. So urban design assessments, and I mentioned before, if you're over 3 or over 4 units, you require an urban design assessment. Now the applicant usually submits one of them, so they get an urban designer, they submit it with the application, we review that assessment. The key point here is that, and I note it here, that assessments are primarily focused on arrangement, appearance and function rather than design preference. So a lot of the time the urban design assessment is around the edges. It's not a complete assessment of the whole application, and we can look at everything. It's really that that size and scale, that bulk and location is set by the bulk and location standards, and the urban design assessments are sort of a layer on top of that. Just note that in that last bullet point. Now this is something that comes up regularly. That there's an upper density limit in the intensification zones. Now just note there that there's no specific density control. When you actually get to the provisions, it says there is no density control. That is controlled by the bulk and location provisions and the urban design assessment to some extent. There are references made in a policy or two about at least 50 household per hectare, but it doesn't specify an upper limit. It's just an at least. And then another issue that's commonly raised with us is this enhanced development mechanism rule. And that is an optional rule that very few developments pick up on. They can choose to do a development under that rule, or they can choose to do it under the normal bulk and location standard zone rules. And I've put a copy of a relevant decision from Tony Hughes Johnson QC, who sort of traverses this whole upper density limits and the EDM rule in some detail, and it's a very useful decision if you want to get your head around how it all works. It's comprehensive, it's lengthy, and it's a little bit technical at times, but it's a good decision nonetheless. That is on our website, so people will be able to go and read that. Common concerns raised with us. Now, we have unprecedented levels of multi-units at the moment. They're coming in thick and fast, and they're not slowing. I think last week was the highest ever that we had, so number of applications. So they're still coming in pretty regularly at the moment. So I just note some of the concerns that are being raised with us there about construction effects, the dominance of these buildings, how they impact on the character of local areas, the lack of parking. You get a number of these in one street, and there's a much more demand for on-street car parking. You're transitioning from a site with one house with lots of landscaping and trees to maybe 4 to 6 units which have very few trees. And then there's some concerns about the quality of these developments and the lack of consultation with neighbours. And a new emerging one is often neighbours are being asked to contribute towards new boundary fences. So the other sort of concerns that are raised, and we respond regularly, we're getting multiple inquiries per day around some of the stuff, so we're responding, we're sending copies of applications, and we're working through these issues with people that sort of contact us. And then my second to last slide, but just some concerns around are the decisions being made correctly, and we've tried to sort of really enhance how we make decisions on these to make sure we are doing them as they should be done. And we've got a core group of senior planners who either oversee these applications or they're considering the decisions on them. We're also working through a practice note, and most of them go out to commissioners, and we use a range of commissioners. So there's a lot of different people making decisions, and these are qualified and experienced people, so it's being shared around in terms of different people and the experience. We've also just completed a recent audit of decision making. That's yet to come back to council. It's planned to, but that's not raising any particular issues. But I'll go over that in some more detail once we can get it back to council. And then just some, this is a bit of a double up, but some more improvements underway, talking about we've concentrated on people, so we've just got a specialist sort of pool of people, and then the practice note. And the thing we haven't mentioned so far is and councillors would have seen this before, but there's an urban design review of medium and high density housing, and that's to inform further work in this area. And it's sort of been held up, that piece of work, as it sort of gets incorporated into the MPS and RMA reform stuff that's coming through. So that's it from me, so back over to David.
Okay, so since it was raised this morning, and it's quite a hot topic, I just wanted to cover off some of the government direction that's coming, because it will have significant implications on us. So, slides have disappeared. Sure, thank you. The first one is the National Policy Statement on Urban Development. That was gazetted by government last year. Now, this is one of the highest order documents under the Resource Management Act. We must give effect to it under legislation. It was set by the government, and the aims of the government were really to ensure that towns and cities are well functioning and meet the changing needs of their communities. It was really in response to the concerns that there's not enough housing being built and wanting to enable more development, and especially it was very directive about having development in the right place, close to transport routes, close to employment, close to the sort of services and amenities that mean that people don't have to travel too far. Now, we did put a submission on this, and I think it's fair to say that Council shares a lot of the concerns that have been raised this morning from the deputations, and if you read that submission, we've got a link there, you'll see that we did put a lot of, we raised a lot of concerns with central government on this when it was consulted on in 2019. But despite that, it was considered last year. We now must give effect to it. So what's the main parts of the National Policy Statement? There's a requirement to do a future development strategy to provide for at least 30 years of growth, and we did of the release report over the weekend, which showed we've got enough capacity at the moment for 30 years of growth in the city. And that was a point well made before. And we must also do a sort of spatial planning exercise to look at the future needs. But we will have to repeatedly ensure that we have 30 years of growth. And as the city is growing, that means we'll have to keep looking and ensuring that we've got 30 years of growth, and may need to find more growth areas to provide for that. The next thing is the NPS requires the removal of minimum parking requirements by February next year, and that must be done without public consultation. That is what the National Policy Statement says. We cannot consult the public on it. That's not our choice, that's what we're required to do. So we are working through that and have to do that by February, and we are aware of the concerns that will around that, but we cannot consult the public on it. But what we can consult the public on is by August next year, we are required to undertake a plan change to look at intensification. That was some of the aspects that were raised this morning around potential increases in building heights and densities, and that will be through full public consultation with everyone able to make submissions and be heard on that. So that will not go through without public participation. So just to explain the directions that come out in terms of that intensification, the NPS requires it in the central city zones, and it doesn't define exactly where the central city zones are. We're looking at that at the moment, but potentially there will be unlimited height, which is a bit of a change since post-earthquake. We had a height limit in the central city, but now the national direction is to have potentially unlimited height in the central city, and enable 6 stories of development within a walkable catchment of the central city. Exactly what a walkable catchment is, still working through with central government what they mean by that. It also says enable, so it doesn't mean every development must be 6 stories, it just means that we can't prevent a development if it wants to be 6 stories high. Then in Metropolitan Centers, which is a term we don't use, it's an Auckland term, must enable at least 6 stories as well, and within a walkable catchment of those areas. Once again, we're trying to work out what does that mean for Christchurch. As I say, we don't have that term at the moment, so does that apply for Christchurch or not? Once again, we're working our way through that and getting guidance from central government. Then the next one is around rapid transit stops, which is once again we don't have in Christchurch at this stage. That's light rail or busways. We are, as you know, doing a business case on that, but that would also enable the 6 stories within walkable catchments of those stops. And just to reassure, there was a map that was put up in the slide by one of the deputations, which is absolutely accurate in terms of our submission, showing density along core public transport routes. Following our submission, and hopefully it was our submission influenced this, the government did change the criteria. So that is no longer a criteria, so I can assure the people making the deputation that that map is no longer valid. They are now focusing on rapid transit, which is just light rail and busways and the like, rather than every single core public transport route in the city. So you can rest assured that that has changed from central government. And then in all other locations, they want to enable density within a level of accessibility or demand. So there was also questions about, can we say no to tall buildings? And there was this term qualifying matters, and yes, that is in the National Policy Statement, where we can modify the direction from government. These are some of the matters where we can automatically do that around public open space. So we're hoping that, and we're working through that because it's where the Rickard and Bush can be one of those areas. National significant infrastructure, hazards, so we can take into account hazards, heritage, landscapes, vegetation. So we're hoping that that will enable some areas to be protected. And then it says any other matter that makes high density inappropriate. So we are looking at what those matters could be. But there is quite a high bar to get to meet that test. There must be site-specific analysis, so analysis of every single property, whether its high density is appropriate or not, and we must ensure that the costs and the broader impacts of those limits are assessed, and that the costs don't outweigh the benefits of those. There's also a question raised about amenity, and that is very much was in the panel's mind when they made the decision on the Rickard area that was mentioned before. But the MPSUD has sort of changed the ballgame to some extent. They now have this policy that amenity values of themselves are not an adverse effect. So that does change the situation. Whether that means that will change it for that particular area or any other areas in the city, we don't know yet. We're looking at this, and once again, it will be something that, whilst council can make a decision on this, it's likely that there'll be other forums, potentially the Environment Court, where the final decision may be made through on these matters. Also want to briefly touch on the resource management reforms that came out recently, and submissions closed yesterday, and we submitted on this last week. These are the new acts, as you're aware, that will replace the RMA. There is requirements in there about that we have sufficient housing. Once again, amenity values is no longer a matter, according to the government, that to have particular regard to. There's matters around protecting voice soils, reducing greenhouse emissions, potentially having less public notification, and having regional plans rather than district plans. So once again, and Christchurch City Council will only have one vote on those on the committee that will approve that plan. So those are some of the changes that are coming. And these are the timeframes Parliament wants to, or the government wants it through Parliament by next year. And just briefly, there has been some questions raised. I just want to briefly touch on car parking as a concern, and there is I know a draft Central City parking policy coming to council next week that will look at parking and how we can manage it in the light of the fact that these minimums are being removed. One of the policies is about enabling residential parking and prioritising that. So we are looking at ways that we can deal with these issues. We do take infrastructure and hazard into account when we're looking at zoning. Also, we look at green space, and we're looking at where we can do some neighbourhood planning around these areas to better provide for green space to offset obviously the potential amenity being lost by the development. As John alluded to, we do take design into account, and we're looking at improvements to how we measure assess design. As mentioned before, we are doing a business case on mass rapid transit and commuter rail to look at where we can, well, if it's an option to have density along those corridors, if we have those corridors in the future. And we are looking at how we can manage greenfield development and highly productive land as well. John's alluded to the maximum density at the moment, which is not in the plan, and there will be limits to whether we can put a maximum density in the future, with the national policy statement being so directive. And there's been questions about having non-residential activities taking up space in residential areas, and that's why we have to intensify, or that we're already got enough capacity, so we shouldn't have to intensify. The national policy statement requires us to implement these directions regardless of whether we have enough capacity or not, or whether that capacity has been taken up by other activities. We still have to give effect to the national policy statement. That is the direction. And one of the concerns that's been raised is around the use of short-term accommodation for housing, and whether that's taking away from residential capacity. We are doing a plan change to manage that better, and that's going through the process at the moment. But once again, regardless of how much capacity is taken up by short-term accommodation, we still need to provide for intensification under the National Policy Statement. I just wanted to close by showing you this picture, and I don't know if you recognise this picture or not, but a lot of concern, and rightfully so, is that this is a direction that is looking at an urban form that is foreign to Christchurch. This is actually a picture of Carlton Mill Road in Maryvale, an area that used to have single housing many years ago and now has sort of 6-storey development. Obviously the context is slightly different. It's not next to Healy Park, it's close to Central City, but it does show that there are areas that have transitioned to higher density and are working reasonably all right. This may be part of our future with these directions that we're having to give effect to. So that's the end of the presentation. Happy to take questions.
Thank you very much. Got the Mayor then, Pauline.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I think it's really helpful to get, factual information out into the public arena, and asking the questions that I'm going to ask. I'm not opposing intensification. I've been really clear about over-intensification and the impact on amenity. So, and I want to start with amenity because I just wondered, one thing that I thought was missing from here, and I kind of apologise for not raising it earlier so that you could have had a couple more slides, but can someone speak about the urban design assessment? Because when I've heard staff tell us about the urban design assessment, it's an incredibly positive process for developers, and the outcomes are better for them and for the people that buy their houses. So is there someone here that could actually speak to it? I've heard, maybe we could get someone to come down by the end of the presentation section. My other questions was, has any development proceeded under the enhanced development mechanism or comprehensive development mechanism, whatever it's called?
There may have been one or two early on.
No, that were granted under it.
I think, yeah, maybe early on.
Oh, I thought there were none.
Well, because it was a transitional provision that came through from the LERP.
Yes, I know what it was.
And then obviously the new district plan came over the top of that.
Yeah.
But if there is...
I thought a couple had been applied for, but that none had actually been approved under it. But
there certainly hasn't been in recent times.
It's one or two, and ever since the residential medium density provisions went in, there've been none.
Correct.
Yeah, and that was because the enhanced development, whatever it was, comprehensive development, had a maximum, whereas the medium density doesn't, right?
It's more restrictive, so they don't use those provisions.
Who signs off on qualifying matters, and can it be challenged, and if so, who and how?
Yeah, so the responsibility for notifying plan change will sit with council with around this table, and as part of that, we'll consider whether there's any qualifying matters to obviously amend the heights, and then they'll go through a hearings process and a decision will be made, and we anticipate that will come back to council. The uncertainty is obviously the new legislation under the Natural and Built Environment Act is going to go through Parliament at a similar time, and that sets up a different regime for in terms of interest in regional planning committee. And we haven't seen the detail of the transition provision, so we don't know exactly what the timing will be in terms of whether council will still have the functions of approving plan changes at that stage or not.
But we have to introduce the draft plan by October.
By August next year.
August next year, right.
Yep, and then there could be yet appeals to the Environment Court. So, as I mentioned before, the final decision may end up in the Environment Court, who knows? Yeah, yep. So yep. I just kind of, because I didn't want anyone to think that we decide that it's a qualifying matter and then nobody can challenge that. No. Okay. Does the MPSUD get absorbed into the Natural and Built Environments Act? Yeah, so the Natural and Built Environments Act talks about setting up a national planning framework, which they say will incorporate all the national policy statements. So there's a number of national policy statements, including this one. that they'll incorporate that all together into this framework. From what we've heard, they are not anticipating changing the direction significantly through that framework, but that's a decision for government, obviously.
So it's likely that that will also contain provisions around qualifying matters.
Yes, that's
right.
Yeah.
And yeah, they were my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Pauline?
Oh, thank you. Can we just go to slide number 2? Because my area that I represent in St Albans is seeing an incredible eye-watering amount of intensification, and the feedback from the residents there is that they're not opposed to intensification, it's the over-intensification. So, see, that doesn't look too bad, but we are not seeing that. We are seeing the buildings right up against the street, right up against the boundary, 0 trees. That's even got some car parking in the back there. So it's like, yes, you outline all the rules and that, but it's interpretation of that, an interpretation of amenity. So how can we overcome that barrier of what these words mean to a community? That's the problem here, isn't it?
Yes, so you're right, this development is quite different than most of the typical ones we seem to see, which is one narrow site with 6 units put on it, so it's quite a different outcome. So that was one of the things that we were looking through this urban design study, and then it sort of got caught up with the MPS and the RMA reform, so we're having to consider any changes in that context now. But yeah, you can definitely on a larger site do quite a different development.
Yeah, and I think that's the point I raised in a briefing the other day, that when developers are trying to maximise the build on where there was once one house, one site, it's a very different matter than if you actually maybe get 3 or 4 sites. You can do much better design and have a better outcome. So I just wonder if we should encapsulate that.
It's a good point, and we tend to see mostly the one sites because it's simple for developers. They can buy one site, they can develop it, they get in and out of there, and it's easy.
But it's giving us poor outcomes.
Yeah, and to come back to the Mayor's question before about urban design, it is quite, so what we see normally is there's several iterations through the application process largely in relation to urban design matters. So we're trying to really improve the outcomes that we're getting at the start of the process, and we make some good improvements. But my point in my presentation is there's limitations to that. It's only so far we can go with the urban design assessment, and hopefully we can get someone to talk about that sort of detail down soon. But there are limitations. We can't take it from the single site and get something like this.
No, that's right. And the other thing is too that when you talked about common concerns, and one of them's green spaces, but trees is what we're hearing big time, the loss of trees. Yep. So I think that should be incorporated into that. And just quickly, I've had a member of the community talk to me about, the construction period is quite stressful sometimes on neighbours, and if you've got a crew that is not very sensitive to neighbours, it can be very abrasive and cause a lot of stress. Someone came to me the other day and said that Melbourne has a kind of a warrant of fitness type thing that builders should comply with during construction. Have you heard of that? And could we look at maybe bringing something like that in, where they sign up to just small things like be careful where you park, don't have the radio on too loud, no really bad language, really loud, stuff like that people find, and rubbish is a big concern as well.
So I don't know about that standard. We often don't have any discretion over it because most of these developments are restricted discretion, which to the non-compliance and construction is not usually one. So they still have to comply with the construction noise standard. That's reasonably flexible and generous, but we do address complaints
that's reactive, isn't it? So is there a mechanism that we can perhaps be a bit more proactive?
Well, we can try, but in terms of we don't have discretion over it, so we can't put a whole lot of conditions saying you must do X, Y and Z. We can only monitor it in terms of the construction noise standard. And we do, and we attend noise complaints, we attend issues like another common issue you get is the construction vehicles are parked all over
Yeah.
the street and footpath. So we do what we can, but again, there's limitations about what we can do.
Thanks.
Yanni?
Just, I mean, the irony in this, and that there's all this focus on finding new places to plant trees, and yet all the stuff that we've heard, there's hardly any protection for trees. How strong, what sort of strength can we put on the protection of established mature trees in terms of the climate change emergency that we're in, and all the signals that we've had from central government about the importance of trees?
So we'd have to introduce new rules for better existing tree protection.
Right.
And also requirements when you're doing new developments for more landscape and tree plantings. They're not there. And I think something that David alluded to before was, and I think you've actually championed this a wee bit too, about how we could create more green space in these areas. So this is happening on private land, but how can we offset some of this intensification with public works, such as small parks, more landscaping and roads as well.
But surely, yeah, I mean, I think we need to do that. But just in terms of the MPS, like how strict can we be around protecting trees as part of this process? That offer us any ability to say that, you know, established trees are really important in terms of climate change, and therefore can we use that as a qualifying matter?
Well, I don't know the answer, maybe David can expand on it, but I know Auckland used to have quite wide-reaching tree protection provisions in their district plan, and they got removed by the government because it was seen as a barrier to development.
Yep.
It was restricting development of sites, so they removed that ability to have blanket protection. So now we're down to only being able to protect quite special trees, you know, mature trees that have got some special values associated with them. Okay. So that's where we're at this time.
Yeah, that was going to say, so it was about 10 years ago, I think, the government at the time changed the RMA again. There's been lots of changes to the RMA over the last 30 years. One of them was to remove that blanket tree protection that you're mentioning. It was in response to some of the people in Auckland, but it applied nationwide. So we can't protect trees generally. We can protect individual trees, but they must be assessed to make sure that they are, by an arborist, to make sure they are a special tree. So we've only got a limited number of trees.
Sorry, just to be a little bit more clearer. So, like for example, where we've got neighbourhoods that have very little tree canopy coverage, or have lower than other areas, or don't meet certain measures, are we able to use that as a qualifying matter to say that we don't want intensification in those areas because of the impact on the existing tree canopy that's there, given with all the climate change and environmental sustainability issues that the government, the council, people are generally now aware of, compared to, say, 10 years ago when it was a very different situation?
So if they are a protected tree, a scheduled tree, yes, we can. But as I said, that's quite a limited number of trees. What we are looking at is whether we can encourage the planting of more trees. So we already require a certain percentage of the site to be planted, and we're looking at whether we can change those as well. And we are also looking at the impact that will have on development, because that's something we've got to consider on the urban development MPS, the capacity that may take out. But we are, it's a balancing act.
I just flag it as an area that I think we've seen the concerns that have been raised. We certainly have seen the experience of the loss of lots of mature trees in some areas. Just the other thing, you referred to the housing capacity assessment. So I'm just trying to get this right. So we've actually got enough capacity, so we don't actually need more capacity. And I mean, in that document, it talks about developers prefer single and two-storey dwellings. That residential buyers look for in a property a house design, lifestyle factors near beach or park, streetscape, neighbourhood character, school zoning, section size, landscaping, internal garage and other off-road parking, privacy, orientation to the sun, ease of heating and freehold title appeal. So everything that people want, it seems this is doing the complete opposite. So, I mean, how much weight can we put into this capacity study to inform our either qualifying areas or our response to central government? Because it seems completely contrary to getting good neighbourhoods when we've done this research and we've got sufficient capacity and we want good urban design.
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, that we do have enough capacity, but one point I make is almost as soon as that report is written, it's out of date because there's more houses being built all the time. So we've got to continue to make sure we've got enough capacity. But also the NPS requires us to make these changes regardless of whether we have enough capacity or not. And whilst I'm sure in hearings it'll be a point of contention when there's some things that whether it should be in or out, there'll be arguments about whether we've got enough capacity or not, and that may sway the decision maker. But generally the direction is, regardless of whether you've got enough capacity, you must intensify in those areas that I outlined in that table before. That's the direction from central government.
And just the final question from me is around the height. Like, so, I mean, my understanding is it's a lot more costly to build up to 6 stories, so that's why we're seeing a lot more sort of 2 to 3 stories. You know, that the economics of building higher doesn't make a lot of sense. So a bit like the submission we heard from the residents group around trying to support it in the inner city or the CBD, but concerned about Rickard and Bush. So is there any sort of there's no ability for us to address the height thing, is there?
Not in terms of feasibility, but we are looking at feasibility, and we are also, I suppose, something to be reminded. Yes, we might enable this. Doesn't mean it will happen. We've actually, for the last 30 years, enabled about 6 stories worth of development in New Brighton. We've never had a development 6 stories in New Brighton. We enable it in the central city, and there's a number of areas in the central city where people have not built up to that height. So just because we enable it doesn't mean it's going to happen overnight. So feasibility concerns may mean that it may not be constructed. So, yeah.
Thanks, Jimmy.
Thank you. My question followed Yanni, the last question. And if we review your one of slides, if the Rickard bush in a house can be considered to limit the height, because here nature has a historical heritage or all those outstanding nature features. I think the Rickard bush in a house, all totally comply with this kind of criteria. But my question is, how about the boundary? How many meters? Because from the key activity center, the Rickard Mall, and also away from the Rickard house and the bush is very close. So I just want to know, particularly today, Helen and Kilmarnock Resident Association Rickard Bush, they concern probably not only Rickard Bush, maybe surrounding areas. So I just want to know how many meters, extension all those Rickard Bush area can be considered limit height.
Once again, the NPS is quite specific that the protection of public open space, as I mentioned before, is limited to the area of public open space. So not the wider catchment, the wider surrounding area. We are looking into whether there are any effects from development on the wider area that will have implications on that public open space, and some were alluded to this morning. So we are very alive to that issue, but the NPS is very restrictive that it's about the public open space itself rather than the surrounding area.
Okay, thank you.
Mel.
I had 2 questions. With the NPS intensification directions, we focus a lot on the 6-storey areas around the rapid transport, but not really that bottom one. And actually that is probably a worry because that's everywhere else. So what does it really mean when it says a height commensurate to level of accessibility? Like, does it mean if you live in a quarter-acre section close to a school somewhere, anywhere in the city, that could be 4 stories because people will want to go to the school that will become huge? Like, what is that going to mean?
That's a really good question. That last one, yes, it could be very wide-reaching. in any other location. But it's not as directive as the other ones in terms of saying it must be 6 stories. We're trying to work out exactly what that means. I know actually, as we speak now, the Auckland Planning Committee is having this very debate. And Auckland have great this is in all the other major cities. So yes, we will bring information to you once we've worked out, and we're working with our colleagues across the country and the central government to try and work out exactly what they meant by that last one, which is very wide ranging. Yes.
And then the other one was around the qualifying matters again. Like I imagine, Dean's Bush will be a qualifying matter, but what will that mean around the amount of area? Like, there's the bush, but will you not be able to build a high density up to 10 metres away, 100 metres? Like, what is that? What will that actually do once something's been qualified?
Yeah, as I said, it's very much about a site-by-site analysis. It's about protecting the site rather than the surrounding area. Yes, there will be, mentioned before, in the current plan we've got recession planes to prevent shading and setbacks from boundaries, so we're hoping that we'll be able to retain those as well. We're working through that at the moment, but the MPS is very specific about this, protecting the site rather than the wider neighbourhood.
So it won't really actually do that much having these qualifying matters, because it's unlikely someone's going to go and knock over the bush. Yeah, let's hope.
Let's hope not.
Andrew.
Thank you. 2 questions, if I can. Influence and accountability. If Christchurch ends up with 1 seat at the table on a regional planning committee, should residents be concerned that there's very limited opportunity for their voice to be heard, or even their representative's voice to be heard?
Yeah, well, we'll see how it plays out. We have raised that concern in our submission on the Natural and Built Environment Act, so that is a concern we've raised.
So it's a concern.
Yeah.
All right. Now, second question really follows on from Melanie's questions. The definition of a walkable catchment, the definition of a metropolitan centre, which, as you say, we don't really have in Christchurch, or we don't define in Christchurch, and the definition of a rapid transit corridor, which, again, at the moment, we don't really have in Christchurch. There's a sense that this policy statement really is, designed, set up for Auckland and its issues and its definitions and so on. The danger is that different councils end up defining these different terms in different contexts in different cities, that then leads to legal challenge. You talk about working with colleagues around the country, but how easy is that when every city is quite different in its nature and its challenges and its needs?
Yes, it is different. It is a challenge. I do also want to point out there is guidance that the Ministry for the Environment have put out on their website around this, and some of it's quite lengthy. And it's open to the public, welcome to read what factors will be taken into account when you're trying to determine what a walkable catchment is, a rapid transit route, and a Metropolitan Centre and that kind of thing. So that's the same information that we have. We don't have any extra information. We're working through that as well, and so we invite the public to look at that guidance if you want to know more, and see how that guidance can help determine how it will apply to Christchurch. Yes, there is a need to have some consistency, but you're right, there is also a need to ensure that the local context is taken into account. So it is a balancing act.
So do you think we can get to a point where we define those terms in a way that works for Christchurch without being subject to legal challenge because our definitions are different than other parts of the country?
It's going to be a challenge. Yeah.
All right, thank
you.
you.
About it. Yeah.
All right, thank you. Just one thing, because obviously we still need to actually have a defined definition around what walkable distance is in Metropolitan Centre. But obviously the map that we were shown earlier, which was from us, is out of date. So it might be good with the information we do have to maybe put more of an updated map of where we see the current effect being.
Yeah, so we'll definitely be doing that. We don't have a map at the moment because we're still trying to work out what it means, but definitely for the public consultation, that'll all be made public and people will be able to submit and then provide feedback on it. So absolutely.
So I'm happy to move the rest of this. You're unable to second it. Does anyone want to debate receiving this information and presentation?
You raised before around the intensification map. Don't have a key, but yeah, it would be good to get a time frame across what time that is as well. Do you know what date that the one with the red spots is?
Sorry, this one here.
Yeah.
It's it's about over the last 5 years. I think it is potentially a few months old, yeah, or if not a year old, but it's the last 3 or 4 years at least.
Right. Okay. All those in favour?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to item 8, Central City Biennial Report, January to June 2021. Welcome, John, Danielle.
Thank you. Good morning, councillors. So I'm Danielle Yeoman and I'm part of the council's urban regeneration team. And I have with me today John Meeker. So the Central City is a key regeneration priority area, and the biennial report that you have in front of you today outlines council-funded regeneration activity between January and June of this year. So the report is structured around the key themes of the Central City Action Plan, which are up there on the screen. So I was just going to run through a 5-minute highlights reel, and then I'm happy to answer any questions. So starting with the city leadership theme, it's the announcements of the opening of Te Pā in October and the appointment of the Kotohi Consortium to design and build the arena were major milestones. Across the city's headline metrics, which are woven throughout the report and are also available if you click that little link there, we've seen some good progress, and this includes increased spending on average across the Central City and also a significant increase in spending by New Zealand visitors. So we had over double the spending in quarter 1 and 2 of this year compared to the same quarters last year. We also had a very strong residential development pipeline, which I'll discuss in a later slide. So moving on to the amenity and activation theme. So good progress was made against a number of sites on the barrier sites list. While no sites were removed during the reporting period of January to June, owners of 3 sites which previously had no intentions are now in dialogue with the council, and they're progressing plans for reuse of buildings. So sticking with the amenity and activation theme on the vacant sites program. So this is a recent program launched at the end of last year. And initial work progress includes working with the owners of unconsented car parks. So we're addressing the legality of unconsented car parks, and in doing so we've had the opportunity to improve the visual appearance of some of these sites. We've also been working on some site improvements. So there's an example there of a site on High Street. With support from the Urban Regen Capital Program, we've improved the appearance of this site, and we're also working on another site which is shown there, and that's a big site on the corner of Cathedral Square. We're also chipping away at site owner engagement, so we're getting in touch with vacant site owners and getting a picture of what the intentions are for the various vacant sites around the Central City. So sticking with the amenity and activation theme, a number of lighting projects were delivered in the last 6 months. So with support from the Urban Regen Capital Program, there have been a number of lighting projects. Examples here are the lighting of New Regent Street, which was a partnership with the owners and also the local business group on New Regent Street, and also illuminated cubes, which were a partnership with the council's events team for Te Rama Mai. And grant funding for our city-making partners, Gap Villa, Green Lab and the CCBA has helped to run events and installations. We've had the NZ Polite Police Force, which was a Gap Villa initiative promoting and encouraging sociability. Plant Works, which saw the delivery of green frames, which can be viewed at Tauranga, and the Gumboot Breakfast, which was a partnership between the CCBA and Riverside for youth mental health. So in the people theme, the number of homes completed in the last 6 months was lower compared to last year, and this is likely a flow-on effect of the uncertainty and disruption caused by COVID-19 last year. What we are seeing, however, is a really big pipeline of residential development in the central city, and this is likely to translate into a bigger central city population as developments are completed and then occupied. Sticking with the people theme, so several projects are underway within the Central City Residential Program. In the neighbourhood space, in collaboration with the site owner and working on the learnings from the Conversation Walk series, the site was activated on Kilmarnock Street, and that's pictured there. Through the residential program, we're also looking to promote the Central City lifestyle. So we've got some web pages promoting Central City neighbourhoods, and there was also a cityscape feature sharing the benefits of Central City living. To promote alternative housing, we successfully nominated the Peterborough Co-op for the Open Christchurch Festival and supported tours of that development. So in the events and marketing space, key events produced over the last 6 months include Lazy Sundays, the Summer Theatre and the launch of the city's new lighting festival, Te Rama Mai. So Symphony in the City was a new concept, and it was created due to the uncertainty around COVID-19 and also sparks. So we partnered with the Symphony Orchestra to create a series of intimate performances, and this saw over 9,000 people coming into the central city. They were held in Victoria Square. In the smart city space, key updates include going live with the updated version of the graffiti recognition app, and new data sets were also added to Smart View, audio stories and community facilities. And lastly, in terms of the Getting It Done theme, progress was made on a number of key developments. So you'll see there the Edmonds Ban Rotunda is now complete, and also Butchers Lane, which is the link between Litchfield and High Streets. And there was also the announcement of the exciting new multi-use project, People's Group and Mike Greer on Madras Square. So happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Tim?
Thank you, and thank you very much for the presentation. Just going back to the amenity and activation vacant sites. So are the property owners working with us to obviously they have to, but are they paying for it? Are we paying for it, the sites?
The owners we're working with at the moment, there's a partnership. So the one on the corner of Colombo and Hereford Street there,
yep.
You'll see the owner is doing all the groundworks and paying for all that. And then we're bringing some of the sort of planters and seating from our assets and bringing those on site to make it a more attractive place.
Yep.
So it'll be a combination. Each site will be different. And the more prominent the site is in the central city, the more we may take a role in enhancing the activation of those.
Because the High Street one looks good as well, and I presume. So with regards to, if you look at the car park on the corner of here, just over the road from that one, there's been a lot of work done on that. It looks a hell of a lot better than it used to. Are we doing the same kind of attitude towards those? Or?
So as part of the consents coming through, and I think a couple of weeks ago you had some presentations around this, the owners are working with Wilson's to bring much enhanced landscaping to many of them, and you'll see those start to feed through. I was walking in this morning and past one site along Manchester Street there that has seen a significant transformation.
I think we'd always like it to be just a little bit better, but it's all steps in the right direction. So over the next few months, you'll see those improve, and then as the ones who have been granted consents over previous years start to feed through the system, they too will enhance the city environment. Until, of course, they're ready to be developed.
Yeah, absolutely. So, 'cause I don't see any difference to the vacant site or a vacant site being used as a car park. They both need to be kind of help the city. Yeah. So we've got the same attitude towards them, except.
Yeah, I mean the programme, which we put in front of you in December, was very much about, where we're going to support owners to get on with development. But if they're not ready yet, we need them to step up and improve the appearance of their sites, and where they're in the central city, really busy locations, make that add to the city, not detract from it.
So are these sites are we working with greening the rubble and all that type of thing, or life in vacant spaces? I mean, is that the...
In some cases, yes. So, yeah, they're still an active city partner.
Okay, thank you.
Sam?
Yeah, just a quick one. Just on the comment about the land and the future intentions of the vacant spaces, you were saying you're talking to the owners and the like to understand what they're doing. When do you think you'll have a sort of clear picture on that?
So we're looking to bring a briefing to you in September, which will take more of the mapping that you've got on the screen there.
Right.
Give you a clear understanding about what's coming along when, which sites we perhaps want to focus some attention on.
So you're nearly there with the data collection, basically?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Thanks. Yanni?
Several questions. Thanks for the detailed report. It's really cool, and just wanted to acknowledge the lighting on New Regent Street looks fantastic. So thanks for doing that. I just wondered, I see that we've funded at quite an expense a number of what I think are temporary murals on hoarding sites. I just wondered if there was any ability for I wondered what happened after the work was complete to those. It would seem a shame for them just to be put into landfill. Is there a process to kind of reuse those murals, or is there an ability to retain some of that for historic purposes or for other purposes?
I mean, street art is a thing, a living thing. I think that's how my colleagues would put it. Some sites inevitably through the process of redevelopment, will be built up against, and they'll be sort of locked into, until that building's redeveloped in the future.
Yeah. I think it was more for the hoarding sites that have the murals done, where it's not part of the new build, or it's not on an existing building that gets built out. It's just part of the.
I mean, subject to working with the artists, because it's their IP.
Yeah.
We will look to reuse hoardings and that sort of thing where that's possible. So.
Yeah, I think that would be worth considering. Just was interested in is the multi-use arena paying for all the transitional work around it, or are we paying for that? Okay.
So I'll just, because people can't hear you online, they're going to come back to Yanni with an answer.
Yeah, okay, cool. And just the other thing, I just wondered if we'd, obviously it's pretty early on, and I don't know if we've got any measurement of it, but do we have any sense of how much the increased car parking charges are, how much of a deterrent, or what's happening with parking in the central city? Like, is there any metric to sort of understand what behaviour is happening as a result of those changes, or how are we measuring that going forward?
That's not a question I'm going to be able to answer for you. I can get an answer from transport colleagues on changes in occupation and that sort of thing.
Thanks, Yanni. Any other questions? Excellent. Sam's moving. Sarah seconding. Any debate on the receipt of this? All those in favour? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much. We're just going to adjourn for morning tea, 15 minutes, so we're back here at 11:20, and we're actually going to go to the transport bi-monthly report. Meeting, item 15, is it?
Yeah.
15. Lynette, over to you.
Kia ora koutou. Generally we'll take the report as read. I'll give you a couple of quick highlights. So this report, yes, it has been a little bit more than 2 months since the last one. However, this report covers up sort of to just past the end of the last financial year, which was a good run on the construction front up to the end of the financial year, and has continued into this financial year. Weather has affected us a bit over the last couple of months, as you can imagine. All the operational programs are continuing well and strongly. We've received Waka Kotahi endorsement of our safety program, so that's great. That's moving forward for the next 3 years. The TDM and education programs are continuing and are well supported. Operationally, our programs are continuing to move forward with our contractors, and actually if you look at page 83, just one wee little highlight, our pothole numbers are starting to decrease. That shows we're starting to make some inroads into our surfacing, which is great. And overall our parking teams are just generally doing a great job out there, so that's my highlights for this report.
Great, thank you. Pauline.
Yeah, thank you, Lynette. Good work.
Thank you.
3.3 on page 76, because I know that these reports are a little bit dated by the time they get to us, because they take so long to transition up through the pipeline. Have you got a timeline for when the community board feedback will be taken into account, and then you can form a priority order for delivering the targeted roading and transport improvement as part of the capital regeneration money?
So my understanding is this is actually very dependent on the community board setting their priorities. So
So
the
they're
team are
not done
working
that
with
yet?
them. Some of them haven't. So if you have, if your community board has and set their priorities, they'll be starting to get going on them. I do want to look at how we report this through so you can see the progress. I just didn't have a chance to do that.
Yes, you might
so
break
we'll look
it.
at upgrading this report so we can show you progress better through the craft work.
Yes, so will you bring it in a broken down format per ward and street and that sort of thing?
So there are still some boards that are still agreeing their priorities, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Sarah.
Thanks so much. The innovating street stuff, so 3.13, just checking the Ferry Road one, which seems to be working really well, and it talks about people having their say on the website. When are the signs going up that actually let people know there that they can actually have their say? So unless you're actually online, I think people using the trial don't know that they can have their say. I've had a couple of conversations with people sort of stopped at lights where they didn't know that it was a trial and that they could give feedback.
I'll have to get Claire to come back to you via the Office of CE and let you know when that's happening.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
All right, now Yanni.
Just wanted to check in terms of just the LED lights. Is there a simple way in which people can see which areas have been done or which areas are programmed to be done?
There's I can show you or release a map.
Yeah, I think a map would be really helpful.
I've got that. I
yeah,
can
that
send that round. Councillor Chen asked a similar question yesterday, so I can forward that round if Councillor Chen's agreeable, and we'll send that on.
Yeah, okay.
It shows where they've been done,
yeah,
where they're programmed to be done,
yeah,
where they're programmed to not be done
right,
because of ecological
yeah,
reasons,
great,
and where we're actually looking to remove lights. So there's multiple maps on this page.
Okay.
Just do that.
Wanted to check around the. We were going to get a list, and sorry if it's been sent through, of the the transport improvement areas. So do we have a list of? No, not the ones that are going through boards. There's a whole bunch of other ones that are being done separate, and I just wondered if we've had that.
A list. Sorry.
Yeah, so I think it might have been an F&P, but there's a list of transport improvement areas that were funded through the CRAF that aren't part of the 5 priority areas. And we were going to
So you mean the road safety priorities?
Yeah, we were just going to get an update on the projects that were in there. And what's been done?
I can give you the list, yes.
Yep.
But so we have said in here that there's about 15 projects, 15, 16 projects, 7 are underway.
Yeah, cool.
So we've tried to give you that.
And I wasn't sure with the PT business case, like, do we, like what, like I'm just trying to get my head around, 7 sites have been identified for option development. So in terms of the PT Futures business case, obviously there's a lot more funding required than just what's available in the CRAF fund.
Yes.
So what's the process for us determining how the CRAF fund gets used for the PT priorities?
So the PT priorities, the CRAF business case said we had to select projects from the PT business case. So they have selected sites that are identified in the PT business case and are working those up now.
So is that going to come back to us for sign-off?
Not for sign-off, no, because they are part of the PT business case, but I can come back and let you know what they're doing.
Sorry, let me put the question around the way. There's a whole bunch of projects in the PT business case,
Yep.
all that require much greater funding than what we've got for CRAF.
Yes.
How, at a governance level, do we prioritise what gets done with the CRAF funding versus what gets done later on?
I'll have to come back to you on that
Okay.
one.
Do you guys understand
Yep.
the question?
I think we'll come back.
Yeah, I think it would be useful just to understand the governance role in that, and maybe you could circulate the 7 sites that have been identified,
Yep.
so we can see that. Just like a bit of a similar question, but does this do we? I mean, I know it's really early days. Do we have any process to track the car parking in terms of what's happening in the central city, like with the increased charges? Like, do we get any financial, I mean, is it more a financial thing, I guess, in terms of the revenue that we're getting from it, or possibly?
I'm sorry, Councillor, I don't understand.
Just the impact of the car parking charges that came in as part of the LTP?
So whether the changes to the charges have affected parking?
Yeah, what the impact's been on either people...
That'll be difficult to do at the best of times, because many factors affect parking, weather being one of the biggest. I don't think we have that at the moment.
You'd almost have to wait
we'd have to come back
6 months to a year before you actually have enough data to...
You'd need to
truly
wait a
understand
year
that.
to get through the seasons as well,
Yeah.
before you even have... We're tracking parking all the time.
Yeah, well, that's what I thought, because we have all this new technology,
Yes.
and so we must have a sense...
We are monitoring our parking
You can't
usage,
expect
but you
data
won't
for a
get
month.
anything until next year.
Right, okay. And just a final question from me is in regards to the MCR that's going from the tannery, so that's the
Heathcote Expressway.
The Heathcote Expressway. And has a new consent been lodged, or
Consents have been lodged, and they are in the system for being processed.
Right. Is it possible for us to get circulated just a bit of a understanding about what the issues are? I guess my concern is around the ecological impact, and I know that there's also the roading. There was the proposed roading change, but that's changed.
I believe it did circulate that around the issues of what it was, so I will find that and resend it, yes.
Oh yeah, I think it was quite helpful. Staff sent through a copy of the first consent application, so it'd just be good to see the revised one, if that's possible.
There's different consents along the route.
Yeah.
So you want the one for Cumnor Terrace?
Yeah, it was the one for that goes around to the Kenaway.
There's multiple consents along this route, so
Okay.
I'll give you an update and a summary of where the consents are at and what the issues are.
Yeah, okay, that would be good. Thank you.
Thank you. Aaron?
Yeah, two questions. The first one's on 3.12, which is the downstream effects for the Northern Corridor. So the very last paragraph, the 3-month bus priority lane trial, which finished over 2 months ago, says here a report has been prepared for the council to confirm an extension of time for the bus lane. I didn't know we were extending. I thought we were doing the 3-month trial, then looking at the numbers to see what's worked, what hasn't, because I note someone's gone and remarked the whole bus lane, so it's all been repainted.
The my understanding is there's a report to extend it to get further information and keep getting information. So the reason we had to keep it sorry, let me start that again. Remember, we've got the independent traffic expert. His concern was that having the bus lane in would negatively affect the surrounding streets. His concern was that if we had it for longer than 6 months, longer than 3 months, we wouldn't be able to change it if it was negatively affecting the streets. We're working with him through this, so that's what that report is covering, and it is coming to you.
So two questions. Firstly, on that, if someone drives in that bus lane now, they wouldn't be fined, would they? Because it's not gazetted or anything. It's just it's a trial that's not been extended. So technically, it doesn't exist. It's just a lane. Yeah.
Potentially.
And, cool. That helps. And then the other one is.
Excuse me, sorry, councillor. As soon as it's gone through the report, though, they will be.
Yeah. So I'll use it for a couple of weeks. But,
report's tomorrow.
What's that?
The report's tomorrow. No.
Close. And then a day. And then the other one is around, would we have not been better to then do what the independent engineer would pay all the money for the advice from, what he had suggested, and done it as a trial, not put it in, and tried what a clearway would look like, so then we can compare the numbers and go evidence-based, the bus lane works better, or evidence-based, the 2 lanes clearway works better. Because at the moment there's a horrendous bottleneck west or north of Innes Road.
Councillor, you're relitigating the decision that council came to and the community board came to around that the community had been really clear that they didn't want the clearway. That was in disagreement with the independent engineer. So we're working with the community board and the decisions that you've already given us.
So it wasn't a trial, it was a decision, just straight to a bus lane.
You gave us a decision to not try the clearway and to see how the bus lane worked.
Yeah, but then that ran out on the 1st of June, so then wouldn't we, no decision come back to extend it?
We're working with the community board, and the community wishes the community board to find a solution that this community wants to achieve.
So do you want to bypass the community board? Can I ask a question on that? So Aaron talked about the bottleneck. Sorry, I'm just asking a question. Right. Aaron talked about the bottleneck. My understanding, the bottleneck's actually the intersection, not the.
Yeah, and lanes. We did when we reported to council, we did say that the bottleneck, the throttling effect of the Innes Road intersection has more impact than the bus lanes do. Yeah.
And also, the independent engineer is aware of what we're doing and is happy with our approach.
They are happy with our approach, and that's why we are proposing to extend it.
So when the light goes green and the other one lane on the other side's full, how's that the intersection?
So Aaron, the problem is this is a report that's going to come next week. So why don't we save all the questions for the actual report when we'll make a decision instead of having 2 debates on the same.
We'll be covered off. We will cover all of this off in the report that's coming. And this is just a heads up that it's coming.
Okay, and then the other one, which is different subject, but it's only got one line in there, is right back up at the top in 3.1, the wheels to wing cycleway consultation has been analysed and staff are continuing to liaise with stakeholders and community boards are underway. That's all understandable, but we haven't seen the results of all of those submissions. This is the longest I think we've ever waited on on feedback on any consultation we've ever gone out to.
They're following the agreed hearings panel process, which we've briefed your board and the other board. We're following that process.
But at that briefing, we still haven't seen the numbers. We don't know, because it could have been overwhelmingly in favour of the design. We don't know that because we haven't been shown any numbers yet.
So this report hasn't given you any decisions. It's just saying where we're at with staff work. That's what we're trying to do. The dates for the briefings, the workshops, additional open days as we agreed, have all been put in the diaries, and we're working to those. It is a long period.
No
it is
problem
a
with
very
that.
complex. It's a very complex project, and we had a huge number of submissions. An unprecedented number of submissions, and the staff are giving them due diligence and also doing due diligence through that community and working with all those stakeholders prior to us coming back and giving you all that information.
But yeah, that's not what I'm raising. What I'm raising is that, like, after the LTP submissions close, we know within days or weeks at worst, but usually within days, how many people are in favour of a stadium size or a new library or a footpath, all of those things. That's all that work's done, and we haven't seen that here yet.
But that's because you do that as part of your LTP hearing. The hearing for this is in a few months' time. So that will all be provided to you as part of that process.
But we always have an early heads up on all consultations, but on this one there's it's silence.
It's not silence because we're
Sorry, I'm going to jump in because we're just having a debate between a member and an officer. It's been answered, Aaron.
So the
you
answer
can either
was
like
mine?
it or not like it, but it has been answered.
So how many in favour or against?
So,
just for the community,
sorry,
just so they know.
Aaron, actual information, there has been information put out about the amount of actual submissions and the general flavour of those submissions.
Not on numbers.
So maybe you should go back and look for the information yourself. I'll go Andrew.
Thanks for nothing.
Thank you. On a totally separate matter, so this is paragraph 3.5, High Street and the tram extension. Good to see this progressing. So the contract for physical works has been awarded, work commencing early July. Now, I haven't been there to have a look, but I'm assuming that has occurred. Delivery will concentrate on getting the invasive works completed as quickly as possible, which is great, getting the big works done in the winter time while it's quiet down there, and then coming back to complete the smaller items. So absolutely agree with the approach, and thank you for taking on board the comments from some of the businesses down there to make that happen. When will you have the invasive works completed? Like, when will the big work be finished?
We're looking to complete.
You'll need to come to the microphone, yeah.
I wasn't expecting this, but Lindsay's here for another report, so she can do this one.
We're looking to have the invasive works completed by the end of November, start of December. If we can get it completed any quicker than that, then we will do. The team are working really hard down there to do that.
And the business owners are appraised of that?
Yep.
And they're comfortable with it?
And we've been sharing that with them. Yeah, we went and spoke to them prior to starting with the contractor once the contract was awarded, and spoke about their business requirements and the different ways of being able to construct the job. And a lot of them were in agreement that getting in there and doing as much as we could as fast as we could, which comes with a certain level of disruption, was palatable for them.
Excellent. Once again, thanks very much for working so closely with those business owners. That's great. Thank you.
Jimmy.
Thank you for a reply to me, particularly regarding to on page 78, the South Express, the section 1 and section 2. But regarding to the section 1, I mean, you have not yet replied to me. That if we start those construction work in March of next year, how long, for the construction period and can be the completed, particularly in the Gilbert's end?
I can't.
Sorry,
okay,
I can't answer it.
I can't answer it at this meeting.
Okay,
we haven't let the tender yet, so until we let the tender, we don't have an answer for that.
Oh yeah, okay. Because you told me already, the tender in the beginning.
Yeah. Next question.
Yes. Okay. Next one is because you particularly mentioned, but it's not here in the finance committee. I also asked about the Kiwi Rail, the kind of drainage and the design, etc., will be completed at the end of July. But now it's August. I just want to know whether those one ever, they provide the council regarding to this one already or not yet.
I'm sorry, Councillor, I don't understand that question. Sorry. Kiwi Rail?
Yeah. Because
Kiwi Rail in relation to the cycleway?
Yeah. That's right. Yeah.
So at the moment, we're working with Kiwi Rail to get designs.
Yes.
We don't have final dates on those yet.
Okay. I mean, in the section of Horseway Junction Road, along the Waterloo Road, next section, but because the staff particularly mentioned waiting for the Kiwi Rail.
Jimmy, I'll jump in because you asked this question most meetings. We've been working with Kiwi Rail on an ongoing basis for a long time, and we know it's not easy, but we're trying to get the best outcome. And as soon as we actually have a confirmed date, we will know. So just it is moving forward, just slow.
Through the chair, one piece of good news. if that's all right.
Yes.
The piece outside of Kiwi Rail's land near Waterloo Business Park, we are looking to start in the next few days.
There you go.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Jimmy.
Thank you.
Phil, you know your pen's a little bit camouflaged by everything else, so you need to get a brighter pen. That's better.
Thanks, Lynette. Just the other day when we had that briefing on the Norwest Arc bit, I was under, and I might be reading this wrong, that I thought that bit was all shovel ready. And in here it says council, transit and Crown funding. Is it pertaining to other bits that we've already... Okay.
Other bits, the bits of the Norwest Arc that are already underway are council and NZTA.
Right, that bit we talked
about the other day is all shovel ready.
Now, are we, as my community board, it says the priority order of projects now sits with Comboards. Are we holding you up, our one? Because I
couldn't possibly call out any one particular. Actually, I really can't answer it. I'll have to come back.
I don't think we've seen the list of, say, righto boys, this is what we're doing, prioritise it.
Boys and girls. Okay. I will double check. I'll have to come back to you on where we're at with all the
because we're keen
boards.
to see it.
Yes, I know.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks, Phil. Excellent. Do I have a mover for this report? Pauline, seconded. Sarah. All those in favour? Aye. Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Right, we're going to go back to item 9. Thanks. Litchfield Street and Cashel Street parking and stopping restrictions. Excellent. Moved Phil, seconded Sarah. Any questions? Aaron.
Yeah, what is the net loss of on-street parking here? Is there any or none?
Which bit are you talking about? There isn't, because we're just switching over. If you're not referring to any in particular, we're just switching over some resolutions just because of the way the city's developed. So outside break free on Cashel, that is proposed to be a P60, and in talks with the hotel, they've requested that be a loading zone to allow for drop off for their customers, and that seemed absolutely suitable. So that changes from a P60. The Litchfield Street loading zone that's proposed outside number 96, that's currently a coach stop, so there's no parking loss there. And on the top image for Litchfield Street, so outside of the bus exchange, that's also currently a coach park, so that would be being moved into a taxi stand, so no loss there. And the Cashel Street proposed taxi stand, that is already marked as a taxi stand. That wasn't spaces beforehand, that was just no stopping, I believe. But we had that in place temporarily for the Hereford Street works when we moved the taxis off the bridge. So this would be formalising that taxi stand so that remains there as a place for taxis to wait to be able to pick up customers.
Oh, right. So, because there was the two sites, that one, the last one you spoke of was, so pre-quake, that was parking right along there. So did that become not parking at which point? Where the taxi stand?
I wasn't here then.
Yeah, that's right, it's 11 years ago.
Yeah, we'd have to confirm that and come back to you.
Okay, and then the other one on the, just along from the bus exchange with the, where you turn in, there's the wee section of P5, all of that part of Litchfield Street was parking as well.
When was this?
Pre-quake, not post.
Oh,
it's been crap there ever since. So I was just wondering, has that been already designated
been
to?
Yeah, it has been. I'll go back and find the meeting that happened at, but it's not parking currently.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Any other, Yanni?
Just where the buses come out, there's just on that page 39, just where the join line is, the visibility is not so good. Is there any consideration given to what happens in that space from a safety point of view?
Is that because of the containers?
Is it going to be signalised at some point, or?
Is this, sorry, can you just, I don't have the same page numbers.
Oh, it's just where the buses come out of the bus exchange and go...
On Litchfield Street.
On Litchfield Street. So where they're turning right out of the bus exchange into Litchfield Street.
I think that because the visibility is blocked by containers.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there are lights, it looks like, in there. That
Yeah. I don't know, is there a plan to signalise it at some stage?
No,
I think
yeah.
they're just covered off, don't they?
Yeah, so when we constructed Litchfield Street, the plan was to signalise that entrance and exit to the bus interchange.
Yeah.
Because of those containers, we can't, so that infrastructure's in place. We can't switch that on currently because of those containers that are present. So once that work's done, that building, those containers get taken away, we can then signalise it.
And just, I mean, I don't know if it's kind of related to this or not, but I am concerned with some of the restrictions and the impact of the parking. But Manchester Street is just becoming absolutely gridlock. Like I was there on the weekend.
So it's, no, sorry, that is off topic. We're just
Well,
going to
what
stick
impact?
to... No, it's off topic.
Yeah. So
we're
can I
gonna
just
stick to
ask, in
this.
terms of the restrictions that are proposed, what impact that will have on people's ability to park?
I'm not sure I fully understand the question in relation to this.
So we're putting in loading zones, but there's no parking there at the moment, is there? Because it's all fenced off.
Are you talking about Lichfield Street or
Yeah.
Cashel?
Yeah,
Lichfield.
Correct, that has been, so that parking has been unavailable since the quake. So
Aaron's asked a question around the same thing, so it's all been answered. So have you got a new question that's actually
just
relevant to
the
this
proposed?
decision?
Yeah, the proposed taxi stand that you've got outside the bus exchange as well. Like, there's a real problem for people that are dropping off for the intercity coaches or the coaches that go further away. Is it possible to enable that taxi stand to be used as a loading zone as well for people dropping off passengers to the coaches?
So I guess in determining the use of that space, we've looked at what the current usage and what it used to be prior to the bus stop being put in there, and determined that the taxi stand is the best use for that road space.
But have you had any feedback or concerns, right? Like, I don't know if you've tried to drop someone off there to get to the bus, but people seem to often quite double park because there's nowhere for people to pull over and let people off to catch the inner city buses. And those buses weren't there before the earthquake.
Yeah.
That's been a new thing with the bus exchange. So I'm just really concerned that there's not enough loading space.
Mr. Chair, if I can answer that one, because I was involved with Mr. Thomas at what was then the Parking Restriction Subcommittee when we introduced the bus stop outside the interchange. At the time, I don't need to go into the details of why we introduced that, but just very quickly, it was because of a shuttle bus that needed a stop at that point. But at the time, the Taxi Federation was very concerned about the loss of that taxi stand, and as a compromise, and I can say it was only a compromise, through the Parking Restriction Subcommittee, we actually installed a taxi stand on the opposite side and further east towards Manchester Street, which was, as I say, it wasn't ideal. So there was a lot of concern about the loss of the taxi stand. So this is an opportunity to put it back now that the bus stop isn't needed anymore.
So, but are the coach stops going somewhere else?
The coach stops are remaining where they are, behind
Right.
the where the taxi stand will go now. The coach stops are designed to be for intercity type services that leave early in the morning.
It's just, sorry, in really simple terms, the idea that people load, we were putting the new loading zone and drop off and then walk across where the buses are coming out versus having some sort of loading space on the same block, if you like, where the intercity coaches are. I don't know if people have seen what happens when the coaches, if there's two or three there, that people are double parking, people have got nowhere to drop people off that are getting those coaches. So it creates a real issue. So it would just seem to me much more sensible to have a loading zone close to where the coaches are so people can drop people off safely rather than kind of what's happening at the moment.
So the loading zone outside 96 is really in response to the development at 96 being turned into a backpackers as well, not necessarily to try and encourage people to walk across from there to the bus exchange. So, and that was in the report. Obviously, we've been working with the local business owners, and as a coach park, they were saying that obviously wouldn't work for their proposed business. So the loading zone suited them a lot better, which is why it's located in that space.
There is also parking opportunities on the other side as well of Litchfield Street. But I mean, we look at all those potential uses when we determine when we recommend what parking to put forward, and based on all that and based on what Mike added before with the thoughts on from the Taxi Federation, we consider the taxi stand as the best use of that curbside space.
Right, and there's no ability to have it as a taxi stand or a very quick a drop-off point. There's no ability for a dual use.
Trying to think of whether we could do something like that.
I don't know if others have been there to try and drop people off to the coaches, but it's a nightmare.
Yep, Sarah.
I just check the inner city coaches. How frequently do they go? In what time of day?
They usually leave first thing in the morning. From my observations, it's full on there from 6 to 8 a.m. in the morning.
Yeah. And is that a time that we're likely to see taxis in the taxi stand?
Yes. Well, yes, they tend to be
yeah.
around that time as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Excellent. So obviously Yanni's raised a point about where people can park to drop off, and maybe it's a case of monitoring this actually once we implement to see if there is a way to have a look at allowing some parking on that side for drop off. But Tim,
yeah, look, I've done it over the years with students going down to Dunedin, and I don't really the amount of people for the short period of time it happens. I don't see because if you look at that taxi stand, it's the maximum would be allowing 3 cars. I mean, everyone seems to kind of manage it anyway, and there's not that much traffic between 6 and 8 in the morning, especially for that type of thing. So, I mean, it is chaos, there's no question about it, but if you're going to solve that problem, it's a hell of a bigger operation than that. So I think it's use the taxi stand. It takes 3 taxis out of the
Okay, so what we'll do is I'll move this, but I might just add another one that just get a report back, or a memo back in about 6 months' time, just to see if there's any actually other issues that have arisen from this in terms of actually drop off for the coaches.
Yep, sure.
Just like that. Oh, sorry, it's already been moved. Phil, are you happy with that? Excellent. So how are you going to word that, Phil? I don't want to report.
Memo.
A memo. Provide a memo. After 6 months. After 6 months. On the effectiveness of the changes outlined in the resolution. No. Okay. Any debate? All those in favour? Aye. All those against? Carried. Excellent. 10. So moved Sarah, seconded Phil. Any questions? Darren.
Just the same one. Is there any net loss of parking? If so, how many? Couldn't see it, but didn't appear to be. So cool.
No, if anything, it's a gain of parking for the businesses in the area.
Sarah, do you still want to move that? Or?
Right. Any debate? All those in favour? Aye. Opposed? Carried. Item 11, the Coastal Pathway, Monks Bay Detailed Traffic Resolution. So this is a technical report based on a decision we've already made just to actually get all the lines in the right place. Sarah's moved it. Do I have a seconder? Andrew? Any questions? Phil?
Just checking that when we do this, which I've got no problem with, it will be done after the coastal pathway is done, so we're not ruining what we do? It's not going to get done before the coastal pathway bit is done.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. So it's good.
We won't be undoing work. So this is part of building the coastal pathway, so the guys are
It's part of the same contract?
It's part of the contract.
Okay, so they won't be, okay.
Yeah.
So then that would answer my other question. All that, the cost of this is coming out of the coastal pathway budget. Thank you.
And it's shovel ready.
Yes, I know. I don't have to ask that one.
Yanni?
There was, I don't know if you recall, there was one submitter that had real strong concerns about safety, about egress to the property. I think there was a power pole quite close by. Has that issue sort of been resolved, or has there been more discussions? Or
yes, myself and David Sutton, the traffic engineer, went and met with him, heard his concerns. We believe the removal of the parking actually improves the intervisibility, so from both parties' perspective, oncoming cyclists and exiting, we believe it's a manageable one,
right.
And that it's not, there's no need for undergrounding it.
And what's the width of the cycle lanes that are on the road, and how do they compare to us?
We've already made all those decisions. This is detailed traffic resolutions based on decision we've already made.
You understand that?
Yeah, excellent. So we'll move on. It's not necessary. Any other questions? All right. Any debate? All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carry. Item 12, appointing the Central City Parking Restriction Subcommittee. So this is the reinstatement of the Central City Parking Subcommittee, which makes decisions which are the same ones as we did at 9 and 10. Move Pauline. Seconded Andrew. Any debate? Any questions? All those in favour?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. I'm just going to do my big spell. We waited all day for that. Item 14, draft submission on social cohesion for everyone in New Zealand, Aotearoa, New Zealand. Are there any questions on this one? It normally wouldn't come to this committee. It's only coming to this committee because of time constraints to actually get the submission lodged in time. We did want to add in. One second. One second. We just want to add another paragraph. Well, we'll put an amendment in the another resolution on there, just to, if we can bring that up. It's just to delegate to the mayor, and actually we might just do the deputy mayor if everyone's happy with that. We don't want to open up just to approve it, because we just want to make sure that we note the importance of local government in the conversation with central government. So that we'll put that on both of them just to make sure that's included. Yeah. So you're still happy to move it, Jimmy?
Yeah. Only this one and the next one actually is the same document, just divided. Two different,
Yeah, sorry, are you debating now?
Yeah, we're debating.
Okay, can we just get a second? Can I just get a second before we debate? Someone want to second this? Sarah? Right, we'll open up for debate. Jimmy?
Yeah, because these two documents is very, very crucial, particularly the central government. One is from the Ministry of Justice regarding to this item and incitement of hate and discrimination in New Zealand. The other one is from the Ministry of Social Development. That's on the strengthen the social cohesion for everyone. But actually, these two documents is the same work. It's a government, particularly central government, in response positively with the Royal Commission, their inquiry and their recommendation. But generally speaking, I totally agree with this one. It's only this item and next item. This item we quote the compliance with the council's particular strengthened community the strategy, also multicultural strategy. We already launched and established one. But next one they didn't, quote with those strategy, particular multicultural strategy, etc. But in here, why I concur and also to support this one, because through this the submission, we can let the central government aware, this kind of the submission. We agree, this society and the community, even not only in Christchurch, nationwide, should be more safer, more accepting and inclusive. That's very important. But we have a practical several bullet points in here. It's not only the language one, actually it's wider, consider disabled ethnic group, and also even the different the kind of the gender, etc. all need to be covered. Otherwise, the easy to be the discriminate. The other one is need to get more information, because this is kind of freedom to speech, and also have to cause the discrimination, hated regarding those speech. Then we need to get more information to distinguish those boundaries. That's very important and crucial. But I'm quite happy that yesterday I chaired all the multicultural the committee, and also central government, particular manager of the Ministry for the ethnic community. He particular from the manager, the Xian Whitfield, he particularly emphasized because they're the organization, they promote from original office only, promote to the military. They have first two priorities. That's very good. One is promoting the value of diversity and improving the inclusion of ethnic community in wider society. Second one, the ensuring government services are provided equitably and in way they are accessible for ethnic community. So these two, why these two very important? This not only, in positive way, we just try to prevent from any the hate or any the discrimination. In the positive way, we can make this society, a community more inclusive, more diverse, more harmonious. That's most important. We are not, just tolerate. We are embrace all kinds of people. That's important. So this the submission is very crucial. And also he particularly emphasized. Okay, briefly. Okay, he also emphasized would like to take a Christchurch multicultural strategy and implementation a good pattern promoting to the whole South Island. That's very good. We should be very proud about this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Jimmy. Anybody else want to add to the debate? Excellent. No, you can't top that. We've got another item to go to. So. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Okay, so the last item 14. Yep, Jimmy moves it. Anyone want a second? Mel. Also added the extra resolution there. No debate. Yannick.
I welcome this submission. I think possibly it just needs a few more tangible examples. If you take what's happened in Christchurch, where central government can have a huge role to play, as can local government. But if we look at the Linwood area, for example, what we've seen is through the government crown agencies such as Kiwibank and Post Shop, they reduce services. We see ECAN cut bus routes to the poorest parts of our city, and we see the impact of big pharmacies on local pharmacies and local business. And so I think what's really important is that central government understand that they have huge influence over a number of these things, but where you see communities, some of the poorest urban communities in New Zealand, getting government services cut, withdrawn, through whatever funding, either funding mechanism through NZTA or PTOM, or through Crown Enterprises, this has a devastating impact on social cohesion. It gives people a loss of hope and of dignity, the fact that these services get withdrawn. So I think, we need to be really strong as a council in recognising that some communities do require greater levels of investment to build social cohesion, but they also deserve to be treated equally as with other communities in terms of service provision. So, if you just take the loss of banks, for local banks where people could walk and then now be required to drive to Ferrymead, although I heard that I think the Ferrymead Kiwi Bank's closing soon too. So, it's just this combination of these small local things that are important that can really have a negative impact on a community. So I support the submission. I think it's really important that we support social cohesion in our city. And I think it's really important that the government acknowledge that they do have a very clear role to work in that regard, and that they need to be much more considerate because, and again, just to, reiterate, the loss of people's basic need of public transport in a community that relies on it so that some of the wealthier parts of town can have increased levels of service is really,
hang on.
Damning.
That's incorrect.
Well, Westmoreland got their bus route.
Incorrect.
And Kashmir lost half of it.
Thanks, Yanni, for your debate.
So anyway, so I support this, but I do wonder if maybe the Deputy Mayor and Mayor could consider adding some tangible examples to where the withdrawal of government services or investment highlights the disparities that can exist in a community.
Sarah?
Thanks. And I think that delegating this to the Mayor and Deputy Mayor is really important, because we did talk briefly this morning about the role of local government in this space. And we know that with the future of local government and the reforms that are happening with rewarders and other spaces, the four well-beings are going to be increasingly what local government do. And so having input into the space is really, really important. Thanks.
Right, all those in favour? Opposed? Carried. Right, we'll close the meeting with a karakia from Councillor Templeton.
Tukuna te karakia. Kia whakairia te tapu, kia wātea ai te ara. Kia turu ki whakataha ai, kia turu ki whakataha ai. Homie e, hui e, tae.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Mike.